Sarah lives on a farm with her son Henry and father Calvin. Every day they work together on the plot, growing organic food for sale. The woman shows her son how to care for vegetables, and Calvin comes up with fantastic stories to interest the boy in the work. One day he goes to feed the chickens and suddenly sees a strange man in the barn, whom he takes for a homeless person. Henry runs into the house and Sarah, grabbing a gun, goes to find out who got into their plot. Having ordered the stranger to come out, Sarah turns on the light, which shocks the man. He even assumes that the woman is a witch, and the guy thinks that he hit his head because he does not remember anything about himself and considers her an old maid because she wears pants. The woman sends Henry to get his father while she continues the interrogation. Henry reminds that the poor guy is very hungry because he ate raw turnips, and then Sarah carries a plate of stew into the barn and checks the poor guy's head for wounds. The man introduces himself as Rip, but does not remember his last name, although he is sure that the area is familiar to him. Calvin assumes that Rip is the son of a neighboring farmer who recently returned from the army. The guy confirms that he served in an infantry regiment and participated in battles. Soon a policeman named Ted arrives at the farm, who offers to send him to the hospital and, taking advantage of the opportunity, invites Sarah to the opening of a new restaurant. First, Ted takes Rip's fingerprints and then brings him to a local clinic. There, the police find out that the prints are not in any of the databases and he is not listed as missing. Nevertheless, Rip is left in the ward for the night. The next morning, the woman, as usual, gets down to business when the guy calls her. He ran away from the hospital, decided to help her with the housework since he has no money, and he considers it a matter of honor to pay for yesterday's dinner. The guy is surprised by the surrounding objects and asks if he has gone to heaven. Then Calvin gives him work to do. The May offers his services in pruning trees. Sarah accepts his offer because her employee quit. Later, Ted arrives. He admits that he did not find any information on the guy, but offers to take him to the police station. Sarah does not understand why, because if the guy is a veteran with PTSD, then the police are the last thing he deserves. She suggests allowing him to live in the farmer's house until he remembers who he is and where he is from. Although Ted does not like this, Sarah promises him to go to a restaurant with him on Saturday, and he leaves. Later, she finds information on the neighbor's son on the internet, from which it is known that the guy was wounded and then awarded a medal. Rip confirms this, but he is so overgrown with hair that it is difficult to identify him from a photo. The couple takes the guy to a local barber, where Rip is scared of the hair clippers. Sarah persuades him not to be scared, and soon they are convinced that Rip does not look like the neighbor's son at all. He claims that he fought the British when a local history expert, Finster, comes to the barbershop. Sarah immediately declares the guy a reenactor, which removes all questions. However, after hearing Finster say that he loves that period of history, Rip reminds them that they fought against their brothers and it was terrible. Later, he begins working on a farm, and the woman raises the issue of payment and offers him to live in the farmer's old house. However, Rip, seeing the house, gets excited because everything around is so familiar. He is sure that he grew up in this house, and as proof, he points to the carved letters and numbers on the post, his initials Rip Van Winkle II, and his date of birth, April 8, 1756. Henry calculates that in this case, he should be 250 years old, but Rip insists that he is only 31 and then faints, realizing that he ended up in the future. When he comes to his senses, Calvin gives him Washington Irving's book about Rip Van Winkle, and the guy claims that Irving was a boy who constantly hung around in a tavern and listened to his father's stories. Although he himself considers his father a liar and a drunkard, and his story a fable. He was born in this house, and he was christened in honor of his father. Because of constant quarrels with his wife, Van Winkle Sr. left home, and all the work on the farm fell on the guy. At the age of 17, he was drafted into the army. He was wounded, but returned to the farm. After some time, his mother passed away, and his sister got married. One day, his father returned unexpectedly, claiming that he had gone hunting, but found a cave in which there was a bottle of brandy. When he treated himself to this drink, a thunderstorm broke out over the mountains, and he fell asleep and slept for 20 years. Of course, this was absurd, and Rip decided to prove that his father was lying. He went to the mountains and found this cave. At that time, a thunderstorm was raging over the mountains again, and the guy decided to wait it out, took a sip of brandy, fell asleep, and when he woke up and came out of the cave, he saw this world and met Sarah and her family. Calvin unexpectedly believes the guy. From that day on, Rip works on the farm and helps the family. One day, Henry comes home with a bruise. Rip calls him for a talk and finds out that the boy is being bullied by one of his classmates. Then he says that he has seen a lot of fights and knows how to defend himself and offers to help the boy with training. Later, Rip helps Sarah and Calvin sell their products at the market, and the woman suddenly notices how much interest her guest arouses among the local ladies. That evening, the woman finds information on the internet about a doctor who successfully treats veterans with PTSD. Just at this time, he comes to her house and is amazed by a modern gadget, and then talks about his toys and teaches the woman to play on leaves of grass, which amuses her very much. In the morning, they do all the work together, and then the guy teaches Henry to fight and is amazed at Sarah's ability to handle modern technology. And the woman enjoys calm and happy days and evenings. She asks the guy about his loved ones, and he says that he did not have time for serious courtship and has never been married. Sarah admits that modern women put their careers above marriage and children, and this amazes him. Sarah tells him about the doctor and suggests going to New York to try to solve his problem. And Henry gives him a toy tractor and suggests imagining that real cars are the same toys. Then he will stop being afraid of them. Before leaving, Sarah warns the guy that New York has changed a lot, so Rip should not be afraid of it. But he assures that he knows Broadway and is not afraid. However, upon seeing the modern metropolis, he gets amazed. Later, they come to the doctor, who immerses the guy in a hypnotic sleep. However, she does not understand what happened to him. It seems that he really went through the war, and this trauma found a way out in creating a complex illusion. She has never seen anything like this before, and therefore offers to conduct a full examination of the guy's body. Doctors find an old musket bullet in his leg, which hasn't been made since the 1820s, and no one can explain it. After visiting the doctor, the couple walks around the city. Sarah says that after her boyfriend left, she decided to leave the metropolis. Then her mother got sick, and Sarah stayed with her father on the farm. And there she thought that she could grow healthy food, and thus found her calling. Sarah takes Rip to the observation deck, and he comes to the conclusion that the Americans did everything right because they achieved such a huge success. Later, the doctor admits that she could not find an explanation for his story and suggests discussing it with Dr. Silver, who teaches quantum physics at the university. The couple comes to him, and he begins to study the new material and tries to explain the situation from the side of the laws of quantum physics. Scientists assume that time moves only in one direction, but by studying the behavior of uranium particles, they suggested that wormholes could appear in space, through which one could penetrate into another time. But for now, this is all true only in theory, and this wormhole would lead to a bend or a rupture in time in the future. Later, Rip thanks Sarah for accepting him and helping him with everything. He worries that he will not fit into the new world, but with her help, his doubts recede. Returning to the farm, they continue to live according to the established order. One day, Ted comes to the house, who would like to treat Sarah to wine and barbecue. And the man becomes unpleasant when he sees Rip, although he behaves politely and well-mannered. He admits to Sarah that he did not find any data on the guy in the military archives. The town discusses his story, and many believe that Rip is a fraud. Sarah gets tired of listening to him, and she sends the guest away. On another day, the family goes to a local festival, and Rip warns the woman that he is ready to defend her honor. She laughingly convinces the guy that this will not be necessary. Arriving at a restaurant, Rip is amazed by the music playing without musicians. He dances with pleasure and then asks to play something romantic and invites her to a slow dance. Ted watches the couple from the sidelines and understands that something is brewing between them, but invites Sarah too. At this time, Henry meets his offender and for the first time dares to give him back, which surprises his classmate. Meanwhile, Finster sells antiques, explaining what and how it was done in the old days. But Rip ridicules his stories, because this is not at all what he thinks it is. The guy explains how certain weapons were used, and the man has to retreat. The family returns home to the enthusiastic stories of Calvin, who cannot forget the disgraced Finster. Sarah puts her son to bed while Rip covers the old man, who has fallen asleep in the chair. He is about to leave, and Sarah sees him. It starts to rain when the woman catches up with the guy on the street and suddenly kisses him. Ted sees this. Sometime later, he knocks on Rip's house. The policeman expresses his suspicions to the man because he is sure that he is a swindler who is preparing to use the poor woman to squeeze out her farm, and advises him to leave on good terms because he loves Sarah and will give her what Rip does not have. In the morning, the guy comes to breakfast while the radio is warning of a large thunderstorm, because of which the electricity has already been cut off. Later, he does work when Sarah and Calvin leave for the store. When the couple returns, it is already raining heavily over the farm, and then the man finds a farewell letter from the guy in which he apologizes for leaving them because he is sure that they will be better off without him. The family runs after him because he described the way to the cave in great detail, but Calvin finds it difficult to climb. Then Sarah hurries ahead alone and finds Rip inside. He tells her about Ted's words, but the woman reminds her that it is her business to decide whom she loves. Then Rip asks her to be his wife, and Sarah agrees to go on a couple of dates. They kiss when thunder rumbles over the cave, and Rip's bag disappears. The couple runs away, and in the past, Rip's father finds a bag in the cave with his son's notebook, where he describes everything that happened to him and asks his father for forgiveness. Rip and Sarah return home, where Calvin and Henry are already waiting for them.